This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, welcome to the show. Hope you're well. I've got a conversation with the great Andy Scott from Sweet, or The Sweet. Either way, you know who I'm talking about. The reason for the conversation, the catalyst, is an Australian tour which is happening throughout November 2024. I will put links to tickets and also the dates in the episode description. Now, in this chat here, it was one of those ones that I've been looking forward to the possibility of having for some time because Andy's an original. Let's not forget that Andy was there at the very beginning when so-called glam was taking off, and his riffs, they've been copied and borrowed. It was certainly interesting to hear his take on his interactions with a burgeoning Iron Maiden. Stick around for that. Some stuff there that I don't think is actually out in the general public, actually. So that's a bit more than just interesting if you're a fan of Iron Maiden. Elsewhere, of course, it was just fantastic to talk to a legend, discussing his the perception of his impact on heavy metal and extreme metal, their look. In addition to the riffs, there's certainly plenty of indicators out there that Sweet have had more than just a passing influence. So let's get to it. Here he is, the great Andy Scott.
I was going to say, what a fantastic name, Mackay Smith.
Yeah, I'm definitely origins in your part. Is your origin Irish or Scottish originally, or are you English?
Welsh. I'm Welsh.
Welsh, okay.
Even though my name is Scott, in the background somewhere, there must be some Irish-Scottish connection somewhere. So,
yeah, well, I think it is.
But joining two names like Mackay and Smith, it reminds me of the Monty Python era.
That's true. Actually, I hadn't thought of it in that light. Yeah. The origins are a bit murky. There's not many of us. I think the family moved from Scotland my father's family obviously have been carrying my father's side, but moved from Scotland to the US in the early 1900s, and then eventually in Australia. That's the broader story behind it all. And never been to England, Ireland, Scotland, or Wales yet, but no doubt I will.
Yeah, where are you based?
Gold Coast, so south of Britain.
So we're talking Tweed Heads, Twin Towns, the gig then.
100%, nailed it. Yes, you get it. Yeah, you get it.
Yeah, we played there before.
How did you find it?
Lovely. I mean, I love Australia. I've had some interesting moments out there. Very first time we went over there, I did a little bit of scuba out to on the Barrier Reef, stuff like that. We've even never been to was it Uhuru? Uluru?
Ayers Rock, Uluru.
Uluru.
Yeah. Spot on in the middle there. Yep.
I said Uhuru. That's Star Trek, isn't it? Yeah, Uluru. Never been there, but flown over it once.
Okay.
We played in a place called Mount Isa.
Yep.
Which is a big hole in the ground.
Yep.
And about 1,000 miners. Which was interesting. And as I say, the territory itself. I've even been out with a ranger in Tasmania, one of the guys who looks after the lakes and the fisheries, because I'm a fly fisherman, and I went out with him one day, and he was in the back of his truck. He had a chilled trout, about 6 inches, lots of them, and he'd stop and say, "Oh, that's a new lake that I haven't seen before," and he'd tip a few of these trout in there, and then we went fishing, and I met a tame wombat that was living in a restaurant truck stop thing, and it was great. Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, it does hint at the broader point, I suppose, which is that you have had a very long and successful career in Australia. Just talk about chart positions and the way the band was embraced. Were we, outside of the UK, were we one of the first territories to embrace the Sweet?
I think mainland Europe and places like Australia, absolutely. We were very lucky to have and of course you speak the Queen's English better than the Americans do, so it's an obvious place to come. I mean, I think the first place we went to outside of Europe was New Zealand in 1972, and then we came to Australia. And well, we've never looked back. I mean, part of the problem for us with Australia, where Susie Quattro has been there every couple of years.
Yeah, you're right.
And she's a huge star out there. She stuck at it at a time when, if we were not finding a promoter who would take us to Australia, we would kind of go, oh, well, maybe something will show up in a couple of years' time or whatever. And of course, we had long gaps from through the 90s and the early 2000s. And then we started to do these rock the boat cruises out of Sydney, and it's kind of rejuvenated something. So hence, we've come to a point where I'm 75 this year. So I think the promoter has kind of said, well, we better call it the farewell tour, because, and I thought he's got my sense of humour, that geezer. I like it,
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. It is being, I mean, you got to build these tours as something, okay? They can't just be, they've either got to be album focused or end of the road, like the Kiss thing, or this is it in terms of what they're doing. But talking to you now, you feel, it sounds like as though you're full of energy, and it sounds as though you can keep on doing this. So is it really the last tour, do you think?
We said something on this side of the pond that we don't want to do those tours that take you away for 6 to 8 weeks, and every other night you're performing, and because in the end that's what will do me in, because my well-being is as important as anything. But when the guy said, when we were approached to say, well, look, you're doing the Rock the Boat, why don't you do some dates? Those some dates started off at 6 or 8. We're now talking about 12 or 13. And we're getting to the point now whereby we will be away for a month. Now, I don't mind that, as long as at the end of it, we all come out of it feeling healthy and good, and we've achieved something. And I think we will have done that on this tour. I'm not saying it's the last time we'll come to Australia, because I really hope it isn't. But we might have opened the door to do a couple of less dates in slightly bigger places, if you know what I mean. So who knows?
Yeah, I was thinking that because we recently had something called the Pandemonium Festival, and there was all sorts of issues around it. I don't know the details around it, but anyway, half of the bands, more than half, I think, actually ended up cancelling. And eventually you had Psychedelic Furs, Alice Cooper and Blondie headlining it. But there was a ton of other bands like Placebo and the like pulled out. Because I understand exactly what you're saying. You're at a point where those long tours are bullshit and they're ridiculous for a start for someone. Forget about your age. I'm 46 and I wouldn't do it. It's nuts, okay?
Yeah.
But the festivals tend to pay a bit more, and it's a bit more of a gravy train, so to speak. It's a bit easier. Has anybody hit you up about doing them?
If you're further down the bill, even in Europe, the money goes to the headliners on each stage. Yeah.
Okay.
So even if you're second or third, like we're playing a festival called Wacken this year, the big heavy rock festival in Germany. Now we are on the opening day, the first major act to play in the 4:00 in the afternoon on the opening stage, which is one of the main stages. And I know for a fact that if we were playing second on the bill instead of like in the third tier, the difference between the costings and everything would be fantastic. But we want to do this festival, and they know that. So, it's as if we're going on tour. We get all the crew, all of the equipment sorted, and we are going to do the best show that we can. And that's the way it will be. Now, traveling halfway around the world, you've got to make sure that guy has what you want equipment-wise to do the tour. And I know that by playing in Melbourne one night and then going up to AIRLIE Beach and then travelling down to Adelaide, we are not going to be using the same equipment on every show. It just can't happen that way unless we're flying everything, and then that just chucks the budget out. So it's a bit of a compromise, but I have some guys in my crew who are on the ball with all of that, and they take the pressure away. As long as I only have to say, everything all right? And if they look at me in the right way, I know everything's going to be fine. But if they don't, I then said, whatever it is, you'll sort it. And he goes, I will. So it's I'm looking forward to it. I have to say, there's every other day is a day off. I think we've got a run of 3, I think, around Sydney. But the rest of it is, there's a little bit of space here and there for travel and,
doing the fly fishing stuff you want to do.
Yeah. Well, people keep saying to me, so what are you going to do on your night off? And I said, sleep.
Yeah.
Don't blame That's me. What I'm going to do.
Yeah. You raise Wacken, and it's a very good point. And here's a question for you around that. Sweet were the first band that I'm certainly aware of to adopt a look and even a sound to a point that you would vaguely call heavy metal. Now, you might have been asked this question before, but I haven't come across it, and I listened to a few of your interviews. But are you aware of just how many extreme metal bands you may have influenced?
I certainly know how many in that of the hair bands of the late 70s, early 80s in America. Nicky Six from Motley Crue used to ring me up in the 1980, something like that, about 3 or 4 in the morning. And I said, do you know what bloody time it is over here? And he said, well, we're just about to go out, and somebody had given him my number, which I didn't mind. And I said, well, if you're a band, send me some material. I mean, now you could have sent it over the internet, but back then, I said, a cassette arrived, and it was, well, for want of a better word, it was horrible. It had no definition, and you could hear that the songs were quite derivative, and you could see they needed a producer, somebody to just pull it together. And I said, send me a ticket, and I'll come over to LA. I said, I haven't been in a couple of years, and the ticket didn't arrive. And a few months later, they'd been in the studio with Roy Thomas Baker, the Queen producer, and he had obviously knocked that bunch of recordings into some more listenable thing, and then they were away. And it's even today, we're still being dragged in. When Motley Crue are on tour, and they're kind of saying, well, if you'd have seen Sweet in the heyday, and you enjoyed it, then go and see this band, that kind of thing. So, it's I don't take umbrage at anything anymore, because anybody who's enjoyed what I've done in my life, I take that as a positive.
I was just watching the video to Teenage Rampage, the Savo, that's all, and I was looking at particularly what you were wearing with the leather outfit I'm talking about. Now, I don't think anybody, I mean, I'm sure KK Downing has probably spoken to you about this or whatever, but they must have taken some cues from the way you were dressed up back then, and even that higher vocal. You know what I'm talking about? I'm a muso, so I sing as well. Nobody did that. It's prominently. Here's the key word: prominently before you guys. So it's great to hear that Nicky Six did that. But Motley Crue, they're not that influential musically, are they? They're just a bit of a cultural zeitgeist because of how disgusting they've been. But Judas Priest, but Priest and Maiden are respected, as you know, and joy to goodness they've taken some cues from it. So have they given you that feedback?
Well, I had the worst thing for me is I was in the middle of producing another band, and their manager, Iron Maiden's manager, knew my agent. They went to college together, and he said, "There's this new band that EMI are signing called Iron Maiden. Can you fit them in? They've got a song called Running Free, and the drums are all over the place." So I said, "Let me have a listen to it." They came in, and I cancelled the weekend with this band and said, Now, all my equipment was set up there and a drum kit. So they came in, and Dave used my guitar rig, and he was like saying, "This sounds phenomenal." And we did a brand new backing track, but the singer, Paul Diano, couldn't sing. He'd done something to his stomach. Now, I wonder whether they were coming into the studio to just try and replace the drums. And I said, well, if you can get a drummer to play as out of time as that drummer, with some slightly better sound, I said, I doubt very much if he's going to be able to do it. And we can't straighten because you have followed the old drum, which sped up and slowed down. So we had to record a new track, and it really sounded good. We also recorded a track called Transylvania, which I think an instrumental, which appeared on one of their EPs or something.
Yeah.
And then I never heard any more. And then I think they realised, EMI, that if we don't do something about it now, the moment's gone. And they appeared on Top of the Pops with the demo, which wasn't great, but it got them off and running again.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I hear, they've replaced the singer. And I then realised that I was probably being used as a way of getting them started and then getting a better singer in, if you know what I mean. And I don't even think the singer knew that they were in the studio with me. It's that kind of, you know what the music business is like. A bit of smoke and mirrors happen here and there,
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Yeah, but is it flattering to know that you've played that role? It's hidden. I get that, but you've certainly played a mentoring role and certainly an inspirational role. Do you? I mean, I understand you don't walk around thinking about these sort of things, but in these moments during interviews when you get asked the question, does that give you time to reflect and go, well, hang on a sec, I was at the beginning of a lot of this stuff?
Respect is a big word for me, and every time I meet other musicians, I get the feeling that there was immense respect for Sweet and what we did. So for me, that's the take. You take what you can, and I have to say that as long as the band was respected. I mean, I bumped into Kiss quite a few times, and I've got a maybe I shouldn't say this because it's going to be used on my birthday at the end of the month. I've got a fantastic video of Gene Simmons about to go on stage in Chile, Santiago, from the beginning of this year, Santiago in Chile. And he basically, he's been asked to do a video, and he looks at the camera and goes, "Hey, Andy," he said, "I've been asked to do this video." And he said, "We're just about to go on stage." And then he turns and goes, "Where are we?" And the guy goes, "Santiago, Chile." He went, "Yeah, Santiago, Chile." And then he said, "I have to say, Ballroom Blitz," because it was something like the 50th anniversary of Ballroom Blitz. And he said, we still play it all the time. He said, and it's a great piece of video. And here we are, 50 odd years later, and you've still got the respect of a guy like Gene, who he doesn't need to do this kind of thing, but he wants to. It's great.
Yeah. I think my first awareness, I'm 46, as I've mentioned, so Wayne's World was huge, as you're probably aware. It probably comes up every other interview, but do you feel like that as much success as a prominence it might have given you to a certain generation, did it feel like as though you typecast the band in a certain light?
Well, I think the UK has a little bit of a, it's not lazy journalism, but they pull up Wikipedia, and the majority of it is about what happened in the UK in the 70s and dressing up and, being banned from playing certain circuits of ballrooms and, getting arrested and all that. Well, that's one side of the thing, but we're still here 50 odd years later, and we're still doing, half decent stuff. It may not have that instant glitz thing that the glam rock era had, but it's still kind of valid. And but around the rest of the world, Germany, I mean, they've gone with us, they've followed us all the way through, and because of that, you've got Scandinavia and Austria, Switzerland, and some of the Eastern Bloc like Poland and Czech Republic, who are still in the zone with it all. I think Australia are partly there because we do get a lot of input from people in Australia on the Facebook thing and on leaving messages on the website. When are you coming? Well, now we are coming. So you've been asking. Let's hope you all show up. But the positive thing about all of this is 2 or 3 of the dates have already sold out, and second dates are being talked about being put in. So. It shows you something, and I just hope it continues like that, because I don't want to stop playing, but I may not drag myself around the world constantly. There will have to be some breaks, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about the people not turning up. There's been a lot of interest. I know there was a lot of interest in the interviews. That's why I was a bit surprised that someone didn't show up for one of the ones earlier on. But shit happens, you know, that people are, you know, they do what they do. But you've got, if I'm not mistaken, there's 15 or 16 albums in the can for you. Okay. And everybody knows the big hits, but which aspect of your career that isn't as appreciated by the fans, which aspect of that do you think you'll be playing on the tour to maybe introduce it a bit more to the live audience?
I was asked this in one of the other interviews, that we've got 50 odd years worth, 300 odd songs to choose from. I think the opening part of the set and the ending part of the set kind of write themselves, those two half an hours. It's the half an hour in the middle or more where we can mix it up a little bit. And I think that you have to look at all aspects. And I know that there are some songs that work better in some territories. With Australia, we're going to put the Peppermint Twist back in.
Okay.
Because it was a big number one there. Now, it may sound a little bit less rock, but there are people in that audience. I've played in Scandinavia where it's an audience full of Kiss and AC/DC T-shirts and Sweet T-shirts. And when we play Wig Wham Bam, they're all jumping up and down. Now, that's not a heavy metal audience's song, but they love it. So you can never second guess an audience. You know, you're silly if you think, oh, that's what they want. And it's when we had that number one with the Peppermint Twist, it wouldn't have been a song we would have chosen, but somebody at our RCA in Australia knew what was going to go on, released it to the radio stations. It went bananas, and it was our biggest hit ever in Australia. So we can't just deny, and why would we want to deny something that was that exceptional?
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. The same thing happened with Kiss in a song called Shandy. It was picked up in the same way that Sweet Song was that way, yeah. But look, you got another song which is a bit different but very, very, very popular, which is Lovers Like Oxygen. So will you be playing that?
Oh, absolutely. There might even be something else from that later era, because for me, that was the most musically challenging and the most the one that's got, when you hear the final recordings of some of the things like Mother Earth, you know, from the Cut Above the Rest album, the album that followed. You look at these recordings, and when you remember that what we had as recording facilities back then to what people have now with ultimate tracks on computer, you no longer have to have generational losses. I listened to some of the recordings back to the 70s and ELO and some of the Queen recordings. They are so still now, you know, in their warmth and mixing ability and editing, and you know, and you sometimes listen to, you know, something's been recorded, you know, on Pro Tools or something.
Oh, yeah.
And it can sound bland because it, you know, if you push things up too hard in digital, you know, you end up with that smacking sound, you know, which it kind of drops out. Whereas with magnetic tape, if you wanted to push something and the meter went into the red, all it did was it compressed and shouted at you. And I miss that, you know. I can still see why people want to record drums on analog and then transfer it across. You know, I can still see, you know, why people would want to do that. And you know, my recording techniques go all the way back to 2-track Revoxes. So, you know, it's if you haven't come through it all, you don't understand the. Because I still keep saying to my engineer who's in my band now, he's the second guitarist, keyboard player. He's a brilliant guy, and I keep saying to him, shouldn't we bounce all those voices down to 4 tracks or something, and he laughs at me, saying they will be on 4 tracks, but they won't be the 16 tracks that we've got over there. They'll still be there live, but we'll only have 4 to mix. And I'm thinking, brilliant. It's a whole new world, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying with the live side of it. Yeah. Okay, so here's a question for you. No doubt it's come up at some point in time, but I think the comparisons are unmistakable. And I'm talking about the influence that you've had on AC/DC. Now, I think at some point in time, Harry Vander and George Young must have handed a very young and impressionable Malcolm a copy of Funny How Sweet Coco Can Be, or Sweet Fanny Adams, or Desolation Boulevard is probably more around the mark there. Have you had that feedback, and have you even spoken to George or Harry about this?
No, I haven't. I know Brian Johnson, who's the singer now, and he is very much steeped in the that 60s blues, Muddy Waters, B.B. King, all that kind of stuff. And you can hear when he sings now with the band that he has definitely got that that thing about him. I was producing an album with him when he got the call, come and do an audition for AC/DC. And I'm not sure whether he was completely, because I said to him, your voice and that band are meant for each other. And it stopped the album I was making, because obviously if he's going to join AC/DC, they don't want a Brian Johnson album going out at the same time. So, I just wished him well, and he's never looked back since. And as far as the influence of AC/DC, I mean, I love the guitar sounds. I love what they do. It's so open and free and simplistic, but it isn't as simplistic as you think. Because I've heard people play Sweet songs, and I know they're not playing it right because they just don't get the accents. They don't get the dynamic of it. And it's the same with AC/DC. I've heard pub bands doing AC/DC songs, and it sounds like a pub band doing an AC/DC song, because if you don't get the dynamic and you don't get the straightforwardness of it. There was another band before them called Free, Paul Rogers, and they were the same kind of thing. You've just got to get the it's what makes it. And if you think that there's been an influence from us on AC/DC, apart from the name, of course, then I think that I will take that. I will take that all day and every day.
It's part of the same musical family, without a doubt. Okay, the Delta blues thing, absolutely, and the way you can't actually teach. No doubt you've had this feedback. You can't actually teach your guitar style. You've either got it or you haven't.
Yeah, that's true. People have said to me, you could probably pick up any guitar rig and it would start to sound like Andy at the end. Yeah, because I want to get a certain sound out of it.
Yeah. What about that high vocal that you've got, where you've got because that's employed a lot across rock and metal these days. It's all over the shop. But I could be, as I say, I could be wrong, but I thought you guys were the first to really bring it in. I'm not really steeped in the 60s stuff, but the 70s is really when my awareness starts to become a bit more apparent. So where did you get that influence from? And do you think you were the first one in popular music? I'm talking about breaking large, having an influence on a global scene. Were you the first person to do it, do you think?
I'm not sure. My influences go back to bands like the Beach Boys. And, of course, when we used to do a Beach Boys cover, I always used to be the fun, fun, fun till the daddy takes the T-bird away. That was always my area. And a band called Vanilla Fudge came out.
Carmine Appice, yeah.
And they were brilliant. Like a 3-piece band no, there were 4. They had a Hammond organ, and they had that sort of harmony vocal with somebody hitting the top fifths and stuff. And also there was a band called 3 Dog Night, with 3 lead singers, and they were incredible and sweet. We always looked, even though we wanted to play like Led Zeppelin or The Who or Deep Purple, we still wanted to retain the harmony vocals that we all grown up with in the 60s, you know? So, yes, I think at the time, there were no other bands reaching, and the keys we were doing it in is the other thing, because most of my vocals were above the top E, you know, on a guitar, which is testing. A little bit testing, that is.
How do you do it these days? Have you brought everything down a step or so to accommodate for it?
Well, we play the songs, I would say, one notch down tempo-wise. And because the sound, we've learned now that the sound is better, we detune to E flat. And it took a little while to get used to that, because we did it about 20 years ago, just over 20 years ago. And there's something in your throat that is tuned to pitch, yeah?
Yeah.
So when you tune something down, and it's only a semitone, everybody's starting to go until the voice reattunes itself. I find that I'm the one who does the high vocals, and I have to admit it's getting a little bit more difficult as I've got older. But I used to be a choir boy and singing all the descants when I was in my, you know, the early teens and late, you know, like 10 and 11.
Yeah.
And I've never smoked. I don't really have moments of drinking, you know, heavily. And I think some of that has brought me out the other end, still being able to sing, you know, in that kind of range. There are notes that I'll never reach again, but when you're out in an audience, it's one of those things, you know, instead of having 5 voices, you've got 4, you know, so.
Well, it's just great that you're still doing it. I mean, that's the real thing, because a lot of people, to your point, mate, they don't even reach where you're at because they're dead.
Yeah.
All that abuse. All that abuse. I mean, we've lost Lemmy and David Bowie, you know?
Yeah. And the other thing is that I'm in an area where I've done backing vocals with ladies, with girls, and they're all looking at me going, how are you hitting that note? You know? And I'm going, well, but they're kind of singing in real voice, and I'm hitting it with a hard metallic falsetto.
Yeah. It's a thing of grace, really, when you listen back to it. I do listen back to as a singer, I listen back to you and I think that's a gift, and you ran with it. You didn't squander your talent.
No, well.
That's a key.
Talent is a very emotive word, but I understand completely.
Yeah. No, yeah. Look, I'll make this my final question, but I think have you got another one right now, or am I the last one?
No, I can smell my wife preparing some form of breakfast. Aren't you, darling?
Beautiful.
It's going to be a Spanish omelette, apparently.
Oh,
lovely.
Fantastic stuff. All right, well, I'll make this last one a good one. All of you blokes that have done such tremendous work over the years, I like asking this question because every answer is different, okay? But when you look back over your career, what gives you the greatest source of pride and feeling of accomplishment?
When I was in my teens and still doing okay academically, but realized that I was never going to be a professional footballer, and I learned that I could fiddle with the guitar, especially the guitar. I used to get a lot of people saying, don't waste your time, get yourself a career. And my wife now laughs at me when I tell people that I worked in a bank for a few months. And she said, what is it? You showed up at a bank for a few months and then became a professional musician. So all I would say to people is never give up. And if you believe in something, it can happen. And there's always something around the corner. Even in your darkest of days, something will show up. You know, I've always been a believer in that. And sometimes you can make things happen, as we have done with the band. In the mid-'80s, Steve Priest had moved to America, and Mick Tucker and I were living in England, and I'd been producing other bands and writing and playing on other people's records. And I started to play with a pub band in London. And they were all of a sudden 1,000 people were showing up in the marquee to see this band play. And somebody said to me, "Why aren't you doing this with the Suite?" And I went, "I don't know." And a light bulb went off. And I went back to Mick and said, "Come on, get your drums out. We're off." And I haven't looked back since. And I suppose it all comes down to to that final thing. Don't let the bastards grind you down.
Great advice, mate. I'll let you get to that breakfast. It's been fantastic to finally talk to you, a bloke who's done it and written part of you've certainly got your entry in there and a chapter in the great big book of rock and metal. There's no doubt about that. So thanks for doing what you've done, mate. You have had an influence and you have inspired many, and without you, rock and metal may sound very, very different. So there you go.
Thank you, Andrew Mackay-Smith. That's what I wish. That name is phenomenal.
You're a gentleman, mate. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll see you when you get down here.
Definitely. Cheers.
All right. Catch you, mate. See ya. Well, there you go. Andy Scott from Sweet, ladies and gents. Hope you enjoyed that one. There are many more conversations over at scarsandguitars.com if you're curious, especially so if you love your extreme metal. So many chats just waiting, and I've also written a book. If you click the link in the banner on the website, you can go to a marketplace of your choice and try before you buy. You know the drill. All right, my name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast. I'm really, really quite thrilled that Andy liked my name, actually. That was something that hasn't happened before either. Just a bit of a tidbit there toward the end. Anyway, Andrew Mackay-Smith signing off. Hope you have a good one. Cheers.